Okay, I think I can start. Okay, Assalamualaikum and a very good morning to our friends online and our friend face to face here. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you today about tables, figures, and data presentation that speaks volume. Although many of you might think that these might only be relevant when you are doing your chapter 5 for discussion, result and discussion, but actually it can also assist you with your chapter 2 preparation as well as chapter 3, of course. Okay, so this is what I'm going to cover. I'm going to talk about where do we need tables and figures. In most of our chapters, where should we place our tables and figures, and how can we convert raw data into meaningful table, and how can we convert raw data into meaningful figure. So a lot of students normally what they do is that they have table, but they repeat the information in the table in the writing, which is we always call that as repetition of information. Because if you have a very meaningful table, you do not need to explain yourself in your writing, the way you write. Because as a reader or people can already understand what the figure means based on your meaningful table. However, if your table is not meaningful, then that's the reason why you have to explain again what the figures, what the numbers in the table means and things like that. Okay, so we're going to look at first where do we need tables and figures. So usually in chapter 1, we do not provide any tables, but we have a form of theoretical framework in the form of figure. So for figures, I will categorize tables and figures because tables are normally to aggregate data. Figures are more flexible. If you tables usually consist of columns and rows, but we call that as figures. It doesn't necessarily has rows and columns. Okay, like what I have here. This is a table because I have rows and I have columns. Okay, so in chapter 1, we usually have figures, and we have that figure in the theoretical framework or conceptual framework. We do not have any table, I don't think so, in the chapter 1. We always have theoretical framework or conceptual framework. For chapter 2, sometimes we have combination and tables. We can also have figures in the form of systematic reviews that we do. A lot of examiners or what happened in chapter 2 or literature review is that we want to review other people's work and how other people's work has introduced a certain gap in their existing research. So that's why we want to present this gap in the form of table. So so that people can see from how long this research has been done, yet there are certain things that has not been covered. That's why it is best to be represented in table, because you can present information about the year of the study, the scope of the study, then people can clearly see what else has not been covered by previous studies. So we do that in the form of table. And in chapter 3, we usually have both tables and figures. For tables, we normally what we want to do is that we want to give an example of if we have a research objective. Okay, I'm not sure if the online can see it. Yeah. Okay. What normally in chapter 3, we use the figure to align our research objective or RO with research instrument and data analysis, because this is how we always do it. It's not how we always do it. It is best we do it like this. So we list our research objective. So this is RO number 1. And then what is the instrument to measure RO number 1? And what is the analysis method that we want to use to analyze the data obtained from instrument? for research objective 1. So this is usually what we do for the table for chapter 3. And sometimes a lot of students would like to present this one in their research design part. So 3.1 we have introduction, 3.2 we have research design. So first you can explain about what is your research design. For example, you use pre-experimental research design, or you use quasi-experimental research design, or you use time series research design, you use exploratory research design. So after you explain about your research design, then we try to conclude, okay, based on this research design, there are 3 objectives being formulated. From the respective 3 objectives, here are the respective instrument and analysis data proposed in this study. And then you want to have this kind of table with first column we have research objective, second column we have instrument, and third column we have analysis of data. So instrument, for example, you can say if research objective number 1, you can say we have pre, post performance test, let's say. Okay, and then what is the analysis of data that you want to use to analyze data obtained from pre-performance tests? So you know pre-performance tests, for example, you obtain score. So you want to analyze the score by proposing, for example, you want to find the mean. You want to find the, you want to analyze the score using p-test or ANOVA test. So it depends on you. So this one helps the reader to be able to see how you align your research objective, research instrument, and data analysis. So this table is quite important in your chapter 3 so that people have general idea about how you are going to analyze your data later on based on the research instrument that you use and according to the respective research objective that you set. Now, in chapter 3, if you haven't presented your proposal, if you are about to present your proposal, usually we examiners would highly appreciate if you can have your proposed predicted graph. What it means by proposed predicted graph is that, for example, if you plan here, your research objective number 1, if you plan to have a pre and post performance test score, and then in the section, in the analysis of data section, okay, in the analysis of data section, which is I think 3.5 and 3.6, in the analysis of data section, okay, you normally have this section 3.5. This section has to explain about how you're going to analyze the data. So, based on this one, you always say that, okay, we want to analyze pre and post performance tests using p-test or using mean. And then you want to propose how you want to illustrate the data presentation. So normally, we write here an empty graph. For example, you want to present your pre and performance test score in the form of graph or in the form of bar chart, for example. Score 1, score 2, and so on. So this empty graph, that's why I put there as proposed predicted graph, is usually needed. Why? Because later on, when you collect your data, then you have some idea, okay, I have to get this data because this data is going to form a graph. So this is the idea of my initial graph before. So you have to, you can remind yourself what kind of data that you need to get. So this is the proposed predicted graph, this one, will serve as a guidance for you to collect the data. So the proposed predicted graph in chapter 3 is actually not for the examiner. It's for you as a researcher to guide you later on, to remind you about the data that you want to have later when you collect the data. Always remember, a research proposal, chapter 1 and 3, are the document that you hold on to guide you with your data collection. Okay, so anything that you take, so that's why it has to be as complete as possible, so that you know if this happened, I'm going to do this. So that chapter 1 and 3 is very important to assist you with your own data collection process. That's why it has to be very clear. In chapter 4, in many of you here, because all of us here, I assume, are tech students. Okay, most of us here in chapter 4, we have a chapter on design and development of learning environment. Usually we have that. If you are doing research in mobile applications, sometimes we have a chapter 4 on designing and developing your mobile application. Or if you have a research on testing the effect of learning in online learning. So you have a chapter 4 on how you design your online learning. Okay, so in chapter 4, we have very important table. We call it as the table of alignment of instructional design. This is a very important table in chapter 4. So what this table means is, this alignment of instructional design table means is that what you do is that it aligns your learning approach with the development of your system or of your learning environment. For example, if some students they didn't put this design and development in chapter 4, sometimes they combine that with chapter 3. That is okay. But if the design and development of the learning environment is quite major, a lot of students like to put that in separate chapter so that it is easier for them to explain. So in chapter 4, as I said, there is one important table, which is alignment of instructional design. So all EdTech students should be able to know. What we do in educational technology is that we take one technology and then we inject the pedagogy element in the technology. For example, if your research is about mobile application, testing the effect of mobile app, so usually your examiner or your supervisor will ask, okay, how you are going to teach using that mobile app. Let's say, okay, I'm going to teach using this mobile app based on collaborative learning principle. So in chapter 4, you have to explain how you align collaborative learning principle in your mobile app. This is what we want to see. This is what it means by alignment of instructional design. So let's say your collaborative learning approach that you want to use in mobile app, for example, number 1, this is usually the table that we call collaborative learning principle. You have the implementation in mobile app. Let's say this is a mobile application, teaching mobile app. Then, yeah, this is the good things that you want to see. Table of alignment between collaborative learning principle and integration in mobile app. Let's see, you say that my mobile app is different than other mobile app in the market because it has collaborative learning principle. So how you say that your collaborative learning principle exists in your mobile app? Okay, and you say because my mobile app has 5 characteristics of collaborative learning. Number 1, it has a grouping system. Okay, in collaborative learning, let's say in collaborative learning, it is very important to have group size. grouping size. It is normally 3 to 5. And then another element that I take from cognitive learning principle is, for example, there is scaffolding. Another element in collaborative learning principle is maybe, for example, there is a collaborative task. And so on. Let's say these are the characteristics of collaborative learning principle that you want to check about that. You have to provide the proof that these elements has been rejected. So if you say that my mobile app has a grouping size principle, so where in your mobile app you have this grouping size? For example, in the main page, there is a group selection menu. Group selection menu. So you can write this and provide the print screen of the project. Put the print screen of the project. And for scaffolding, you see that my mobile app is different because it has a collaborative principle of scaffolding. So we want to see where is that scaffolding element in your mobile app. So you see that this is available in the menu, learning activity, let's say. So maybe in your menu learning activity, you have scaffolding element. And you also say that my mobile app is different because it has collaborative tasks. Then you have to explain in your mobile app where did you have the collaborative tasks. Let's say this is available in the group activity menu. Okay, you see, this alignment is very important so that you can tell that how your research is different than other people's research and how your mobile app is different than other people's mobile app. That's number one. And when you want to say that your mobile app is effective, so people will ask, why do you think your mobile app is effective? Maybe it's the collaborative learning principles that is being injected in your mobile app. So this table is very important to show how your learning approach aligns with your development of your learning environment. Whether it is a learning environment, whether it is mobile app environment, whether it is quizzes, whether it's existing application, you still have to show what kind of learning approach that you have embedded in your learning environment. Okay? And finally, of course, we need tables and figures in chapter 5, which is results and findings. Okay? This you can ignore the number of chapters because sometimes people do not have up to 6 chapters, sometimes they have only 4 chapters. So it says, but you just pay attention to the section which is results and findings. So normally we have tables and figures also in our results and findings chapter. So these tables and figures is used to present our collected data. Up to here, do we have question? Any question so far? Or do you have any other idea on where should we have our tables and figures? So far that I can think of, these are the places where we can have our tables and figures. Okay. Next, how to create a table? Number one, you have to think of the purpose of the table. Okay, so before you construct a table, you have to think of what kind of information that I want my readers from this table. And do you think that that's better explained if you write it? If you think it's better explained if you write the information rather than you put that in the table, then do the writing out. Do not present the table. Okay? Sometimes if you present a table, then it creates more confusion. So if you think that it's best presented in the form of writing, then you do so. Okay? But if you think that this information is better summarized in the table, then you propose a table. There is no limit of number of tables in our thesis. You can present as many tables as possible, of course, as long as it is a purposeful table. Okay? And then you have to please plan the columns and rows for better readability. Put a proper name for your column, put a proper name for your rows in your table. Okay? If you think that anyone outside of your area can understand the table, then that means your table is a good table. Okay? So you do not have to explain to them how to read this table. Okay? If you have to explain to someone else how to read this table, then that is not a good table. The third point that I want to highlight is that please do not leave empty columns or rows. Sometimes you think that you want to assume that it is actually this row. There is nothing to be put in because it is not really relevant or it is not related. Do not leave that empty. Put that NA. You also put that NA as a short form of not available or not related. Do not leave any empty columns or rows empty. Do not leave them empty because people will assume, is there something missing here? Or is it a technical problem? Or is it now do we have to consider what happened in these columns and rows? That is not good. Do not leave any columns or rows empty. Okay? And finally, give a title to your table. You have to name your table. And your table have to reflect the title, reflect the content of the table. Make sure it reflects the content of the table. If your table is about, let's say these two columns, collaborative learning principle and implementation in mobile time. So what would be the proposed name? You can say that alignment of collaborative learning principle with implementation in mobile. You can have a long term. So doesn't, as long as it can explain what the table means. Okay? So for example, if we have a table here, we can name it as an alignment of collaborative learning principle with implementation in mobile app. That would be the title of this table, which is long, but it explains what is inside the table. Do not put simply as alignment table. What does that mean? Alignment of what? Okay, you can call this table as alignment table, but people will ask the alignment of what? Okay, put a very specific name for the table that reflects the content of the table. Okay. Now we go into converting raw data into a table. Now I know a lot of you here collect data using questionnaire or survey. If you collect your data using questionnaire and survey, you always have information about demographic information. I'm not going to explain what it means by demographic information, but demographic information, for example, you ask about what is the respondent's gender, what year they are currently studying, for example, what is their course, or what is their age, something like that, are demographic information from the survey. And a lot of students think that they cannot be creative with the data presentation table based on survey, which is not true. You can do a lot of creative things, a lot of creative data presentation using table if you are using survey. For example, I give you is, we call it as a cross-tabulation. Cross-tabulation between demographic information versus the perception in a survey. Usually you collect data, you use survey if you want to collect perception, right? So you have data, demographic data, and then you investigate their perception on a scale of, for example, 5. Very strongly disagree, strongly agree, strongly disagree, disagree, strongly agree, and agree, for example. Okay, so what you can do is you can combine this data, this perception data, rather than you put that as, item number one. There are 5% says strongly agree. Item number two, there are 6% says disagree. Rather than having that very boring table for your data presentation, what you can do is that you can have a pivot table. We call it pivot table in Microsoft Excel, or I think in SPSS, we call it as cross tabulation. What they can do is that they will cross one variable with another variable. So this is an example. I have here a perception about the first item is continuous quality improvement related to online learning is already in place. Is it in the pipeline or is it none? This is one question. And there is one demographic question here that asks the participant about what is the category of higher education provider that they are currently in. So there are two questions here combined into one figure or one table. Okay. One question is about whether the continuous quality improvement in online learning is already in place or not. The second question is what is their category of higher education provider? So these two questions are being combined in one table. So we can see which higher education provider has continuous quality improvement already in place. So it is not presented in separate. So here you can read, okay, there are 3.5% community colleges saying that CQI is already in place. There are also 4.38% that community colleges say that it is in the pipeline. So because it is being cross-tabulated, so you can understand where do they come from. People who say, for example, you can say that people who agree, you can know where people came from. This is an example is all about. So you can see here, for example, 3.59 or let's say polytechnic. Okay, there are 13.55% of polytechnic says that the CQI is already in place. There are 8.76% of the polytechnic says that the CQI is the pipeline. There are 4.78% of polytechnic says that there are none CQI at their institution. So when you combine this data, it gives more meaning, right? Present that as there are maybe 70% says it is already in place. There are 50% says already in the pipeline. There are 6% says there is that. But you don't know where is this 6% coming from. So this is what this table explains to you. We call it as pivot table. You can build this pivot table itself. You just select the rows that you want, and then it will automatically create that for you. Or if you have more budget, you can also use Tableau. The spelling is, this is quite expensive, but it is very useful. Tableau, Tableau software. This Tableau software can help you. I use Tableau software to create this. For this kind of table, I use Tableau software. Okay, but it is quite expensive, but you can use trial. And I use this one for trial. You can use trial, and then once you use trial, you can choose either use the software on web or you install that in your computer. So I suggest you try to install that in your, or maybe you use that in web. Once the free trial ends in web, then you try that, you install that on your computer. Okay, so that was my strategy because I want to use it for free. Okay, it is quite a very expensive software. I mean, it's very expensive, but you can just drag and drop the variables at once. It's very easy. I do this in less than 1 minute because I just drag. Because I really key in all data, I just drag the variables or the question to the respective row and columns. Okay, we call it as pivot table. You can also do this in Microsoft Excel. We call it pivot table. Okay. And this is an example of, this is an example of just now, or I present an example later on. Okay. I explained just now that we can see table in chapter 3 where we want to align our principles with our development. This is one of the example of my students' plan. So what he did was that he explained the learning step, and for each learning step, what is the learning task, and what is the treatment given based on each step. So maybe in this way, this is very difficult to explain if you write it, right? So it is better explained if you just fabricate that. So you put that in the table, then you can see, okay, this is what happened with step 2, respectively. And this is what happened with step 3. Here another example. Okay. This is an example of table used in results discussion. You see here, sometimes a lot of students think that they only need to have one column and one row. You know, when instead you can have a combination of columns such as this. Okay, mean and standard deviation for respective task 1, mean and standard deviation for task 2. If you are a very novice researcher, I saw a lot of students who produce up to 3 tables explaining, repeating the same thing. When in fact, they can combine all of this in one table. Okay, if you're very novice, you might produce maybe 4 tables. 1 table for task 1, 1 table for task 2, 1 table for task 3, 1 table for task 4. When in fact, you can combine all and have a subsection for mean and standard deviation for respective tasks. Okay, this is easier and it is more understandable rather than you have 5 separate table repeating the same thing, repeating the same column name. Okay, so what I'm trying to explain is that you can try to combine everything in one table. If it gets too complicated, then you can have another. What I'm trying to say is, do not repeat a table that has same column name, that has the same row name. Think of how you can combine that in one table rather than having the same repeated table. This is different than having a lot of tables. You can have a lot of tables, but do not have a repeated same table. This is what I'm trying to propose. Okay? And also, when you plan also the position of the values that you want to key in. For example, here, people will always read the table from rows. Then only they see the column. So here, what I mean is that people will see that, okay, the mean for task 1 is 0.67, and that 0.67 is the mean for density. So because you have, once you have calculated the table, you also have to test reading it. Try to read your own table whether it makes sense or not. Here, the standard deviation for task 1 is 0.07, And that standard deviation is the standard deviation for density. And so on. Okay, try to make sense of, does this value really make sense? Sometimes we mix up between the columns and rows. When we read that again, people will tend to have a misconception. Okay, this is not actually, how do I read this table? So try to read the table so that it really means what it is supposed to be. Okay? Right? Now we go to figure. How to create figure? This is a little bit long than creating tables. Okay, first, similar to the table, you have to think of the purpose of the figure. Is there any duplication of information with table? If your information sometimes duplicate with the table, why do you think this figure is necessary? Sometimes if you have, for example, you have a table of scores of student learning performance test for pre-test and post-test. Then you develop another figure that shows the bar graph. I'm talking about bar graph. So that bar graph has the same information of the score of students for pre and post performance tests. How is that different? This is the same thing. Okay? But if you want to show the gap, the difference of the score, maybe a line graph is better. Although it's a repeated information in the table that we have provided, but it can show the gap. There are things that figure can duplicate from table, but there are things that figure cannot duplicate from table. If you think that table is sufficient to explain the information, do not have another figure that explains the same. Okay? People don't really like if okay, this is the same with the table, so what is it trying to say? Okay? And then plan for your figure for better readability. Okay? Make sure it has a suitable font size, suitable font type, and it is consistent. Okay, if you want to label your figure, make sure the label can be read, the label can be seen, and make sure it is consistent. And choosing colors for pattern, this is very important as well. Usually, when you print out your pieces, it is in black and white. If it is black and white, people cannot really differentiate if your bar graph is red or if another bar graph beside that is blue. If you print that in black and white. So maybe you should use pattern rather than using colors. Okay, use pattern to differentiate from one bar graph to another bar graph rather than use colors. And if you think that using color is very, very important, think again about whether the color is necessary or not and what different color means. If you think that, okay, I just want it colorful, I just want this to be red and blue, is it means different if it is green and black, for example? If it really matters, then think about what different color means. What different pattern means should also have, maybe you get too excited with patterns and then you end up having a lot of things with patterns. So you also have to think about what different pattern means. Okay? If certain pattern appear in another figure, then people will tend to read this pattern is related to that another figure sound. We have another figure just now that has the same pattern of bar. Is it the same? Okay? And think about its different patterns. If your figure has lines and arrows, remember your lines and arrows that you use in your figure has to have a meaning. What it means when you have a thick line, what it means when you have dotted lines, what it means if you have a one direction arrow, two direction arrow, what does it mean? It matters a lot to people who read your writing. And finally, give a title, of course, that reflects it. Let's look at some examples. Okay, I put up an exercise title. Let's say I have my research objective is to analyze the effect of mobile app on students' learning performance. That is my research objective. And I have two scores. One is pre-performance scores. Two, I have post-performance scores. And after I have these two scores, I want to analyze that distributively. I want to tell my audience what is the mean, frequency, and standard deviation. Okay? Do you think is it suitable to be shown in the form of table, or is it suitable to be shown in the form of graph? Or if you want to have that graph, what kind of graph that you think that we should have? Okay, people online. Any idea? I just want to show the mean and standard deviation. Let's see. Oh, friend, this is this. What do you think we should have? Table or graph? Okay, bar graph. Okay, if you have bar graph, let's say, then we have, let's say I have two scores, pre-performance scores, and I have post-performance score. So I want to show three things. Number one is frequency. Number two is the mean. Number three is the standard deviation. I can do it like this. Okay. Mean, SD, frequency. Let's say. But this is actually not really valid because mean has different unit. SD has different unit. Frequency has different unit. Mean is in the form of decimal points. Frequency in the form of round number. SD, standard deviation, is the form of decimal points. Okay? In a way, maybe I cannot see, I can put mean as standard deviation. Okay? That is possible. But if you want to clearly see, you see, the research objective that I want to show, that I want to prove is the effect of. If you want to see, to clearly see the effect of, I highly propose for you to do a line graph. Create a line graph. Because the line graph can show the effect. You have line graph for pre-performance tests. You have line graph for post-performance tests. Then you will be able to see how much they have improved because our research objective is we want to see the effect. Okay, so think about how to understand my audience that this has effect. If you show bar graph, then it is quite difficult to see how we can see, like maybe for example, the post-performance test score has higher bar graph. But for example, for a lot of number of students, how many bar graph that you want to create at some point. Okay, I really recommend want to see the effect. Then you try to construct the line graph. So line graph, you have different color for pre-performance test. You have different color for post-performance test form. Okay, and or if you do not want to use color, you can use dotted line for post-test form and straight line for pre-test form. You can have different patterns of lines. Then you can have dotted lines and you can have straight lines. To differentiate each one is different color. One is red, one is blue. Okay, and here we put the mean value as straight line. the mean value for pre-performance test score is blue straight line. The mean value for post-performance test score is in red line. So in terms of mean value, you can see the increase from 40 to 60. Okay, the straight line here, the mean line here is 40 for pre. The mean for post test score is 60. So here generally you can see the movement from 40 to 60 in terms of mean value. And for individual student down here, you can see how they have improved from 15 to 14 up here, for example. Okay, and you can see the gap. The distance between the two lines can be seen clearly for respectives. Okay. Here, this is similar to, this is not similar. This is how I propose to do pivot table. If you want to combine demographic information with other questions in your questionnaire. So this is what students normally do. For every item, they reported the percentage of strongly agree, they reported the percentage for agree, they reported percentage of neutral, and so on. So you will have a lot of repeated tables such as this one in your findings, which is kind of boring and you cannot see how is that compared to another item. Okay, so what you can do is that you can combine all of this into one graph that can explain all the construct. Here we have content. For content, strongly agrees, agree, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree, with the respective percentage. And interaction, strongly agree, how much, agree, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree. Okay, it's the same thing, but it is combined into one graph so that people can clearly see, okay, it is higher for content, it is lower for interaction, it is quite high for delivery, and quite low for assessment. Then you can compare with respect other item, question items as well. Okay, it is more meaningful compared to you present this one separately one by one, the value. Okay. In creating a meaningful figure, you have to be a little bit creative. And you have to think ahead, how can I best present this data? Okay. And we also see a lot of figure in our research procedure. A lot of students like to, a lot of our supervisors always advise our students to have that in the form of figure, so that you can have, people can generally see what will happen from the beginning to the end of the research procedure. So for this one, what I wanted to highlight is the role of the arrow here. Here you have this big arrow, and at the side here you have small arrow. So what does that mean? Is it different or is it one? Okay, this is one of my students' work, and I did comment, how is this arrow different? Okay, and he has no answer, so we change that. So always use the consistent format for arrows, so people can understand that, you know, it's just the same thing. Nothing is different. We use the same type of arrow throughout the same figure. You can use different type of arrow in other figures, that is okay. But if it doesn't have any meaning, any significant meaning, use the same type of arrow when you want to produce a specific figure. This is another example. Okay, this is the final geometrical framework, and they have the dotted lines here. You also have a straight line here. You also have boxes in red. You have boxes in white. So what does it mean? What does this mean? Is it different? or does it have any different meaning? Okay, so here you can always put a note here. What dotted lines means, what arrow means, what line means, because it has this one straight black line here. A very short black line here. It also has meaning. So the straight line means what? Correlation and what? So if you want to introduce different types of lines, different types of arrows in your figures, put a footnote what it means. Okay, that's very important. Even this one, we have questions on why you put all these white boxes in these big red boxes. Okay, and our explanation before is that because these are the elements in social interaction. So that's why we put these white boxes in the social interaction red box. And the red box indicates the variables in the research. That was the explanation. But here in the notes here, my student didn't put any explanation about what red box means, what white boxes means, which has triggers question. Okay, you want to minimize questions as much as possible. Okay, because if we have questions, that means that the thing is not clear. Okay, all right. You can also combine tables and figures. When I say that do not repeat figures that already exist in tables, that doesn't mean that can be done. But if it has to be done, make sure it is meaningful enough for the same information to be repeated another form. Okay? Sometimes you have your pre and post test score in table, and then you have another graph, but pre and post test score as well. Why you want to do that? Okay, sometimes you want to show the gap and the differences. That's why you have your information in table, then you construct a line graph because you want to show the gap. Okay, that the gap is huge between pre and post test score. Then that is okay. Then people can accept. Oh, okay, then from here I can understand. Rather than reading the values in the table, I want to see that in the form of graph. I can clearly see the huge gap, little gap, and so on. Okay, and then that is acceptable. You have two types. You combine tables and combine graphs together using the same information. Okay, here also, this is also the same information from. No, this is not the same information. So this is the information, the table down here, there is information about the inferential test, and up here is the information about how it is different for critical thinking skills across 5 types of difference, 6 types difference of critical thinking skills. Yeah. Okay, so this is an example of combining tables and figures. Your figure has to complement your table has to complement your figure. That's very important. How it support each other, but not repeat each other. You can repeat if it's very necessary, like the case of pre and post test score. You want to see the effect, you have the raw data, and then you build a line graph to show the gap. This is also a combination of tables and figures. Here, actually, this information is the same information, but because of this specific software that we use social network analysis, so it can illustrate the strength of the density, the strength of the centralization, the strength of the in-centralization through the graph. This is a truly repeated information from table here, then we illustrate that here. But once we illustrate in the form of this network pattern, we will be able to see what this figure means. So this is also, you can do this to combine use the same data, but present that in both tables and figures. If it becomes meaningful. Because sometimes if you see a lot of values in the table, it will not make sense. So what this value means? So this is what the value means in terms of graph, which means that certain people are connected more frequently than other people, and there are people who has less lines with each other. Like this one, the blue lines is not that frequent compared to to other lines. So you can combine both if it can give additional insight and you can explain more about the data. Okay, then you can repeat your information in the table and figure. Finally, tools to create table. This is what I have suggested just now. You can use Tableau or you can use as simple as Microsoft Word. Okay, to create figures, I like to use PowerPoint to create figures, and then I copy and paste that. I import that as image in my Microsoft Word document, but I draw the PowerPoint first. I also like to draw figures using Canva, and there is one more tool which is Draw.io. Draw.io is a free software. I'm going to show that. Draw.io. I forgot to put that here. Draw.io. DREW.io. This is a free software. Okay, so you can choose where you want to save your diagram. So let's say I save that in device and I want to create the diagram. So this is very interesting if you want to have your want to draw your research procedure or you want to draw your flowchart. Let's start with blank diagram. So create. Then save that first. Okay, let's say I want to start with here. In this week, you can just write week 1, let's say. Week 1. Okay, then I click here and I can directly, it will automatically generate the arrow for you. Of course, you can change your arrow. You can change your arrow to a dotted line here, or your line here to be dotted ones. So this is very helpful. You can just drag that around. Of course, you can color the boxes, whatnot. So you can always import this. You can import this as PNG or JPEG or PDF. Okay, I like this tool very much. I use it all the time. I always tell my students to to better draw your this one using Draw.io is one of the tools that you can use. Okay, to draw your figure. Or you can start from scratch in Microsoft PowerPoint. That is also okay. Other than that, I think let me show you this here to have this pivot table. Let's say I have score 1 and category gender. So male, 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 4, 3, 5, 6, 8. So if I have this data, I can data Where is the insert? Okay, you can insert here pivot chart. So you can choose the table range. You can click here, you want to appear gender, and then you want that to appear score. So this is also easy, but this is to have a pivot chart. So they will generate that for you. So this is a number of female students with score with the respective score and male student with the respective score. Something like that. Or you can always write which one you want to be. Which one you want to be the gender, like in the legend, which one to be want to be in the axis, respective axis, for example. This might not make sense, but this is how pivot table works. Okay. Any question? Any question? Any question? This one just now the link is scroller icon. I'm going to put that. EREW.io. This is the website of this one. Scroller.io. Okay. Okay. No question? Boleh? Okay. If there is no question, thank you very much for listening. I will share the slide with you, but we have to remove some of the examples because some of the examples belongs to my student who recently graduated, but I have asked him for consent. But maybe not that many of the information that I'm going to share again in the slide that I disseminated to you, but I will provide some examples for them. Okay? If there is no question, thank you very much, everyone, and good luck with your tables and figures. And remember, always think ahead what you want to put in your figure and what it means. Same goes to your table. Right? Thank you very much, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. You want my slide now? We'll do stop sharing.